Hi, I'm Chef Katherine in the Growing Chefs Ontario Classroom Kitchen, and for our March Kids cooking class, I'm going to teach you how to make maple tamagoyaki. Tamagoyaki is a traditional sweet and sour Japanese rolled omelette, and this recipe is all about technique. Traditionally, mirin, which is a sweet rice wine, is used to sweeten the omelette, but because it's maple sugar season, we're going to use some maple syrup in this recipe instead. Before you get started, make sure that you wash your hands and read through the recipe completely. The preparation for this recipe is very simple. Basically, we just need to crack our 2 eggs into the bowl here. And then I'll add in my soy sauce. I like to use a light soy sauce. Kikkoman soy sauce is my favorite. It's just not too syrupy. And then we'll add our maple syrup, which will add sweetness to the dish. The soy sauce, it also adds salt, so you don't need to add salt for this recipe. It's measured out perfectly. And then the last thing that I'll add is 2 tablespoons of water. Traditionally, there is dashi used, which is a broth that's made with kombu, which is a type of seaweed. But the water, it lends itself perfectly to this too. It's a little bit more of a neutral flavor. So that's everything. I'm just going to whisk it all together. The maple syrup has a tendency to kind of hang out at the bottom, so make sure you really whisk it well. Perfect, so now we're ready to make tamagoyaki. I mentioned before that this recipe is all about technique. So when you have a recipe that is really technique driven, it's important that you have all of your mise en place gathered before you get started. So my eggs are prepared here. I have a small non-stick pan, and I have a small container that's filled with just a little bit of grapeseed oil, and I've just folded up a piece of paper towel. I'm going to use this to just gently wipe the inside of the pan with the oil. Another very important part of this recipe is heat management. So I'm going to turn on my stove to be about medium high. I don't want the eggs to cook too fast because then they'll brown, and too slow they won't set fast enough. So medium high, and just adjust the heat if needed. I have 2 silicone spatulas here at the ready. These are going to be the tools that I use to gently fold the omelette. Traditionally, it is done using chopsticks, but what's important is that you have something that will not scratch your non-stick pan. So that's why I have the silicone spatulas. So my pan is heated up for a moment. I'm just going to add a small amount of oil and carefully sweep across the inside of the pan, just making sure whenever you're doing something with a pan that you're not touching any of the edges. That's the most likely spot that you would get burned. So the oil is shimmering, that means my pan is nice and hot. My egg mixture here, I'm going to add about 1/4 of it into the pan. You hear it sizzle right away, that's a good sign. So I'm just going to gently tip the pan and spread it around. And the eggs will start to set almost immediately. That's perfect, that's just what we want. So once you feel that the bottom is set, then we're going to wait for the top to be almost set. So right now it still looks a little bit wet, so that's okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold over the edges of the egg here to kind of make a rectangle. Traditionally, tamagoyaki is made in a square or a rectangle shaped pan, so that makes it really easy. So once you have your edges folded in like this, I find it easiest to make sure that this side is right by me here, the side that I'm going to fold. So I have that here. I'm just going to gently with my spatulas lift and fold. If it's not perfectly round, that's totally fine. This is maybe your first time doing this, so it's just a technique that you need to practice. So now I'm just going to scoot it over to the edge of the pan, and we're going to repeat that process. I'll add a small amount of oil, just adjusting your heat if you notice that it's cooking a little bit too fast. Mine's a little bit brown here, but that's okay. So I'll add in the next 1/4 of my egg, just right into the pan here, and just tip it, adding a little bit more if you need to. And then again, I'll just let this set a little bit more, and then I'll fold in the edges. And then turn my pan so it's a little bit easier to roll. And then using my spatula, roll the omelets. So one more time here, putting a bit of oil into the pan. And then tipping the next quarter of our egg mixture into the pan. So traditionally, tamagoyaki is eaten as a snack or a breakfast, but you can use it for whatever meal you'd like. I think that it goes along great with all the other recipes we have for our kids' class this month. You can also make it with sushi as an accompaniment, or I like to make tamagoyaki and put it in some ramen for a fancy kind of garnish. All right, last time. But remember, swipe the oil in the pan, then pour the egg mixture and let it set. If you have some of these bubbles here, you can also just pop them, and that will help kind of to fill in with the extra egg. So I'll gently fold in the edges a touch. And turn my pan. And then just flip and roll. It's a little tricky when you get to the end. And again, if it's not perfect, don't worry. I've got a trick to help kind of straighten up the edges. To form the tamagoyaki a little bit better, I just have a clean piece of paper towel, and I'll gently plop the omelet onto the paper towel and set that aside. And then I'm just going to roll it up to wrap it nice and tight. And this way, as the egg that's inside just finishes cooking, it will just form it a little bit of a tighter roll. So we're gonna leave this for about 4 minutes until it's about room temperature. Our tamagoyaki has cooled, it's just slightly warm to the touch. So I'm gonna just unwrap it in the paper towel here. And you can see just being in there, it helped it set a little bit firmer, so that's perfect. And just so we have a little bit of a nicer presentation, I'm gonna cut off the ends. And this is a chef's snack, so I'll set that aside for a moment. And I'm gonna cut it into 6 pieces. So first I'll cut it in the middle, and then I'll cut each piece into 3. Now to plate this up, I'll just put it up here so you can see all of those beautiful layers of our omelet there. And in this, the soy sauce and the maple syrup pair together beautifully, and you have this sweet and savory omelet. It can be eaten at room temperature or warm, and I hope you enjoy this treat.